Hello, everybody. It is May 26th, the holiday weekend of Memorial Day, and I'm going to talk to you about Tom Robbins' book that also occurs over a holiday weekend, 3-day weekend, different holiday though. And the party and my birthday, about 12 weeks and 1 day, so just about 3 months. And I have two more books after this to get done, and hopefully I can do that. So the book I'm going to talk to you about today is Tom Robbins' Half Asleep in Frog Pajamas. It's got a really cool Keith Haring photo here with aliens and dolphins, which figure into this book. So I don't know which came, well, obviously Keith Haring came first, but this book was published in 1994, and it's about the, I mean, it's fictional, but about the Friday the 13th recession, maybe in the 90s. There was a mini crash before our recession in 91, and the mini crash of 1989. Maybe that's what it's about. But anyway, so um, the backdrop of all this, it happens over Easter weekend. So markets are closed Good Friday, and they also crash on the Thursday before Good Friday. So they don't open until Monday. And one of our female protagonist is a young broker who has made some poor choices for her clients, as many brokers did in the late 80s and 90s, leading to the other recessions that we've had, right? And so she's in a lot of trouble and is hoping the stock market rebounds. Um, and so it's kind of preoccupied with that in the back of her mind throughout the 3 days that this book takes over. So you're probably wondering, what does a stockbroker who has potentially lost all her money and all her clients' money have to do with frogs and pajamas? It's a really good question. And I'll get to the answer because, well, there really is no answer, as we know with Tom Robbins. So after the last couple books with the sprawling plot lines, Jitterbug Perfume, Over Time and Space, France, New Orleans, you know, Albar and Kudra Who Lived Forever, and then Skinny Legs and All, which was, about the animate objects and trying to get back to Jerusalem and spend time for the Third Temple and the artists and I mean, there's a lot of people, a lot of characters, right? So this one is a nice coming back to something more akin to Still Life with Woodpecker, where we have just a handful of characters and a real sort of much narrower plot line because it only takes place over 3 days, right? So, so how much can happen in 3 days? Well, if you're Tom Robbins, a lot can happen. So we have Gwendolyn, who is our broker, our young broker, um, who loves money and wants the big juice, is what she calls it. Then we have her 300-pound friend called Q Joe Huffington, and was also a well-known psychic and tarot reader as a character. We have Gwendolyn's devout boyfriend, devout as in Christian, and devout to her, Belford Dunn, who's rather wealthy. And we have Belford's pet monkey, Andre, who used to be a jewel stealing monkey. He used to help a jewel thief in France, but he's reformed. And we also have Larry Diamond. Sometimes he refers to himself as Uncle Larry, which is creepy to say the least. And he's our male protagonist. And I was reading somewhere about Tom Robbins's work, and they're saying that until the next book, First Invalids, with Switters, we don't really have a story told through a male point of view. And I got to thinking about it after reading this book. Larry gets a lot of page time. So I feel like even though we sort of see things happening through Gwendolyn's perspective, she's a kind of a just a foil for him. Like, 'cause she doesn't really, she believes in money, she's very classic, this capitalist, and this is how, the world works, and not really thinking much more beyond material, thoughts. And so she's just sort of, canvas for Larry to sort of, which I think could be a stand-in for Tom Robbins, to paint his ideas of something that is bigger than. So I mean, I would consider Larry a pretty big character slash protagonist in it. There's a handful of other characters, but they're really minor and compared to. So we really have a handful of characters, which is nice again to follow. And again, it takes over 3 days. Um, so Larry is a former stockbroker, and he lost it all in the big crash of '87. So we can think about the age difference there between the new Gwen broker and Larry. So I'm starting to see this theme of age differences. And when we look at the next book, you'll see that again, that there are lots of older males and younger females, which, I mean, Tom Robbins gets to write what he wants to write. And so he just comes back from Timbuktu, and he has been searching and doing things and exploring since he lost his money, and in the crash of '87. But he was, but this is all in Seattle. This is not the New York Stock Exchange. So this is still small times. Well, not small times, but it's not the New York Stock Exchange. So Larry comes in as the, oracle, if we want to use that, to help Gwendolyn see through this weekend that there's something more than material wealth. So it's very, similar to lots of themes in Robbins's books before. He talks about buying into the big lie, this idea that the people in charge, have are benevolent, that they have your best interests in mind. And he really kind of hits this over and over again and multiple times to do that. And there's a fair amount of ranting against capitalism. And I don't know if this, because it's written in the late '80s and '90s, and was all that, Wall Street and all that wealth and things that the author is seeing. But as we know from previous books, he's never been a big fan of capitalism or money or that kind of thing. I wrote 286 down here, but then I go to the page and then I don't even know what I am looking for. Um, it's his rant to her about money, and just this idea of how to there's a thin line between charity and greed. At the bottom, they're both expressions of insecurity and manifestations of ego, which is interesting because her boyfriend, Belford, is one of those, like, giving money to the poor kind of Christians, and that kind of thing. So it's really interesting. But he does say joy is always more important than juice. And I think that's just a fun little quote there too from page 191, that, it's really about a mindset towards where you're at. But juice does make joy a little bit easier, but you can have joy with a minimum amount of juice, right? Just a mindset of how you think about it. Um, so what else is interesting about this? They're just real individualist bent, sort of like pull yourself up by your bootstrap mentality, or this idea of choice. And I'm not sure where this is coming from, if it's like a Tom Robbins thought or if it's a sort of a devil's advocate kind of thing to make us think about, again, how we think about our situations. And is he doing it for Gwen's education, to make her think differently about what's happening? But he talks about that being secure and safe, particularly financially, is purgatory. It's not really living. And he has this part with Larry, not Tom Robbins, but I think there's a thin veil there sometimes. Talks about the homeless making choices to be poor, that they've always had choices. And I think we've gotten to a place in our society, um, far removed from the mid early 90s, to think that some of these people have choices. There are homeless people, because they talk a lot about the homeless situation in Seattle in the 90s. And I know even when I visited in the early 2000s, it was still a problem. And I think homelessness is an issue that we have to think about. And there are some people that choose it, right? And there are some people that don't. And I think just to paint it with a brush to say that because of choices people have made over time, sometimes people have choices made for them. And again, I mean, we have very little diversity represented in Tom Robbins's book, and to know about, so it's just like not a lot of humility in this one, right? And it's just really interesting, and I'm not sure how to feel about it. So I encourage you to read it for yourself and find out. And of course, he gets to, Christianity and the issues with Christianity, because that's an overarching theme in all of Tom Robbins's book. He does have a really nice quote about wisdom, though, in this book, which I thought was really interesting, that I'll share with you. On page 168 of my copy. Um, Someone had said Larry had come back from Timbuktu heavy with wisdom. And he said, she's wrong about that. People don't get heavy with wisdom, they get light. The wiser you become, the lighter you become. This is an unsolicited testimonial for lightheartedness, and I suggest you pay attention. Which is interesting because it, is a continuing theme of him of to be serious but not take things seriously, right? And that's what we see, is this idea of joy and not taking oneself too seriously, sort of continues, but there is some really other interesting stuff. But what is the half asleep in frog pajamas, right? And what does this have to do? And I'll get back to Cujo and the tarot too. So Larry talks about the Dogons tribe in Africa and some African religions, and their uh, knowledge of Sirius, the star, the dog star, Sirius B and Sirius C, and how perhaps that they were inhabited by amphibian type people who visited, alien visitors. Kind of sometimes I don't get it all, but it does make you think, how do, you know, uncivilized tribes have these advanced understandings of stars and advanced techniques to build. I sound like that guy from, the aliens helped them build the pyramids, but it's somewhere along that line, right? That we find out. And really, it's kind of Larry's Diamonds, and maybe some other people's idea of evolution and how we evolved. Hence the dolphin, and it also plays in, that we've evolved from water beings. He also has a big thing with water. Water, it comes up in all of his books. We've evolved from these, water-based creatures to these land-based creatures, and perhaps something was lost in that evolutionary process because we're, um, you're not in a good place right now in the book, right? Over the 3 days. There's some other subplots in the book that I don't want to share because I don't want to give it away. But because they're important. And the one thing I couldn't remember anything about this book except for Cujo and the tarot and that she disappeared. And that's all I could remember. And so when I reread it, I was like, oh my goodness. And the ending is one of those endings where I had no idea how it was going to end. And it's a pretty good ending. But it's not the one you think is going to happen. So I'll just tell you that. So Cujo is a tarot reader, and Gwen gets her tarot read pretty regularly. And if you've ever had your tarot read, it's really not to tell you the future, right? It's like this self-reflective, self-awareness, a kind of process to make you kind of more aware of what's going on, of your subconscious. And Gwen keeps getting the Fool in her reading, right? And so there's this big conversation of the role of the Fool and being a fool but not being foolish, right? And its role in the tarot and like major arcana being like the Fool's journey, or the Fool begins it, when they step off that cliff. And so there's some discussion of the different tarot cards with the Fool and the Sun play pretty important roles in here. So that's interesting. And Cujo, who disappears, also uses tarot card to communicate from where she disappeared to. So it is a really easy read. It's fun. Probably one of his shorter books. There's some things that are cringy, but as with every Tom Robbins book, if you're don't like sex and you know you're going to cringe at a lot of the things that happen. um, and if I would love for someone to read that about his idea about choice and the homeless and give me their thoughts, because I'm a little interested. I'm a little confused about what he's trying to say there, because these are philosophy books and like there's a story, but there's always a moral that the character or the author is trying to get across. So anyway, so I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you read it. It's a much more accessible book than some of his other ones. And I will talk to you soon.